Hi guys, and welcome to a very improvised, sort of off the top of my head video. So no idea how this one's going to go. Might be rubbish. You've been warned. This was inspired, as many things are, by some other content creators. As usual, my favourite, the guys over at Pack Mentality on Spotify and probably elsewhere, but Spotify for sure, who focus on the competitive angle of Malifaux, and they recently did a bit of a Q&A on how to improve at Malifaux and how to, more specifically, how to analyze your own games. That was a viewer question that came in via a Patreon subscriber, I think I'm right in saying. As always, I was very interested to hear their thoughts on it, and it was interesting to see three competitive players with quite different focuses on on how to analyze a game. So Michael had a very four-step plan with analyze this, look at how much did luck affect this, how much did my out there choices affect the game, how much did my play, I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me for messing that up. And then Hamish sort of said, no, I'm just sort of thinking about not so much a four-step plan and really like having a document. It's more like, was my positioning and target choice, and did my choices in that game lead to the outcomes that I was hoping that they would lead to? And if they didn't, why not? And then what can I learn from that? I think everybody has there's going to be so many caveats in this video. Everybody has different ways of approaching the game and also analysis of the game, and just every step. Malifaux is such a deep game, so, for example, my answer to that question, how do I analyze games? For me, one of the most important things that I want to know at the end of a game is, most especially if I lose, but even if I win, what were the most important and replicable choices that led to that outcome? So if I hit this situation again, will I with some degree of certainty be able to replicate the outcome and or avoid it? So, if I've lost a game, a recent game I lost was Shill into Lynn. I tried to take a voting approach and got domed by just Hannah and Tunnel Rats and cards. And solid play behind that left me no way to sort of claw my way, but literally claw with Lin 2 back into the game. And so I was looking at that game and thinking, right, what were my, what were replicable decisions, choices, things that happened in that game that I can try to avoid? And it was... So was it sort of my positioning? Well, Tunnel Rats and Hannah can reach pretty much anywhere on the board, and if he's got the cards, which he did and I have no control over, then he can one-shot a bookkeeper a turn. So my mistake was in crew building. It was a twofold mistake. One was choosing Lynn based on my sort of inner certainty that he was going to play Tara, because every outcast ever has played Tara against me every game for so long that I've just been conditioned to expect that. And so I blinded myself with my prejudice against Tara. And then, having ended up with Lynn into Shill, I disrespected the killing and reach power of that crew, and should have played a much more elite list, and had to go sort of reach out of keyword with some armor solving problems, some Desper, some Kenshiro, something like that. And so I went about it the wrong way. So that's how I look at a game. I look at, like, right, where did that go wrong? And after that, I largely ignore the majority of the game. So once we got into that game, once I've identified the thing where I believe I lost, so here's the decision path that I went down, and at the start of that path, I lost the game, in my opinion. And then after that, yeah, okay, there might be another hour and a half of play, but it doesn't matter because that's the point at which you can learn from. And I like learning. So for me, the only thing that matters in every game is what is my most important point of learning. There might be two, but usually just one. I usually find one thing that I wish to learn from every game. That worked, that didn't. That led to a path that I couldn't walk back from. Scheme choices are often the answer to that. Like, I chose the wrong schemes, and from that point, I chose the wrong models to score those schemes, which led me down this wrong path. And after that, it's not worth worrying about all the little decisions you made afterwards, like, oh, maybe I should have attacked, or maybe I should have lured that guy instead of... No, that's irrelevant, because the learning occurred a long time before that, and that's how I analyze games. Right. Another thing that came up during that episode was Brandon talking, and also Hamish talking about Asami. And that's a topic, that I've talked about quite a lot with a lot of people. And what came up was a twofold sort of thing. One is a realization of just how flexible she is in terms of her approaches that she can bring. So spamming a shitload of Akaname and, relying on rift damage and hazardous and this and that, or channeling from 8 inches away and sort of charging you safely and stuff like that, versus summoning a Joro every turn and just beating the hell out of you and then having Asami charge you and kill you herself. There's a lot of things she can do. And the focus on the fact that the belief is, and I'm with them on this, that she is far too good, that she's too versatile, she's too strong, everything on most of her keyword is too good, and that poses a lot of problems for players that are running into her. And so Brandon ran into a Thunders player, and he came to me and presumably a couple of other Thunders players and said, well, what would you play into this pool? Is it always going to be Asami? And if it is, what are my options? What can I do? And we talked about Lynch 2 as a potential sort of, because, and this is where we're going to get into a little bit of a different topic that I'd like to discuss. We discussed Lynch 2 because I personally, Drayson, I don't like playing Asami into bio because of the existence of Ma 2, and because I've had rough games against Ma 2 where I've felt it's one of the only situations where I've felt behind from crew building with Asami. And so, and because Ma 1 is such an obvious and easy and incredibly simple basic core of bio pivot, if you don't go Asami, they just go Ma 1 and have a great game regardless of what you play. So there's no advantage to be garnered. So I really dislike declaring Asami into bio. And so I have started to lean towards Lynch 2. I think Lynch 2 brings a lot against bio and does well. But when somebody else comes to ask for your advice, you have to kind of say, well, look, this is what I would do, but you need to have a look at the opponent. You need to have a look at what they play, because they might just not play the same stuff that I do. They might not have the same thoughts. And indeed, he went with Asami into bio, which I wouldn't do. So you've got to be careful. And this is one of the things that came to my mind and that I wanted to sort of to share, maybe. And of course, feel free to ignore me. You might disagree. You might think I'm wrong. You might agree and think, well, that's obvious. Why are you even talking about it? That's fine as well. Your call. Be careful with listening to advice. You should ask for advice. You should go to players that play your faction and say, hey, so you know my options, same as I do, and I'd like to, banter back and forth. What do you like into this pool? What do you think my opponent's going to go for? What have your experiences been? And listen to what they say. It's not that if you're going to ask them the question, listen to their answer. Like, what's the point? If you don't listen, don't ask. But I think so many games get lost by people listening at the expense of what they know, at the expense of their own comfort, at the expense of their own experience. And I think, I believe, that this was part of why I lost the top I can't remember which round I went out in, 16, 8, 32, one of those. 16, I think, 16. And one of the reasons I lost that game was because I decided to listen to another player. In my case, it was Plarg. That's a player that I train with a fair amount, and we'd both played a good amount of Asami, and he'd played against my Asami a lot. One of my main training partners at that time. And he talked me into, no, you should just play a standard Asami 1 list with Than and Maddox and it'll be great. And in my head, I was planning to actually go Asami 2 that game. And I had reasons for that, and it was sort of it was against Guild, and I wanted to have more reliable stun options. I was planning to actually hire an Obsidian Oni for more stun possibilities, and I was hoping to abuse the sort of choke points that were there on the map in order to really start pumping out these shockwave rifts and causing him issues that way. But it was a high stakes game, you know, it was a top 16 game, and there are a few things that can make you listen to someone when maybe you shouldn't. One is if you have a perception that that player is better than you. That might be true, that might not, but if you have a perception that that player is better than you, you are really often going to listen to them because you don't want to ask the advice of someone better than you and then ignore it, because you'll feel like an idiot. So you're sort of trying to avoid shame by following that advice. Another possibility is that it gives you an excuse, either to yourself or to others. Well, I followed the advice of this good player, and so I feel vindicated going with that option. And that can be a nice safety blanket, but I'd rather win the game. And so I was really annoyed with myself that I did that I didn't trust my own judgment. And of course, if you say, well, no, screw you guys, I'm going to go and do my thing, and then you lose, you do sort of, you feel like an idiot, because it's like, well, now I feel really stupid, because not only did I lose, I was told how I probably should have won, and I didn't do it. But I think that comfort with what you want to play will lead to so much better results that even if the crew that you're advised on is better than the one you took, I think the result will often be better if you play your list. Now, God, it's so difficult because there's so many caveats. It's just such a deep game. The problem is that if you completely go off the rails and you go, no, fuck you guys, I'm playing triple geisha. Like, no, Jesus, don't, oh God, don't do that. You should stick with your comfort, but you should allow other people to give you some good ideas and to maybe try to ward off your worst ideas. So if it's like you've got a solid idea, but then you're thinking, actually, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a geisha. What you need is someone to go, you're fucking mental. Would you like me to send some help? Because probably that's a horrible idea. Now, ironically, recently I've actually considered putting a geisha in a list, and that's why it's on my mind. But generally speaking, you need medical help if you're trying to put that kind of model in a crew. And what you want is you want a sane person to have a little chat, you know, and you sit down and you say, hey, what do you think about this? And they say, oh, maybe I'd do this, that, and the other. And you go, oh, well, I'm thinking about putting a geisha in. And they go, talk to me about the geisha, like explain that to me. And if you haven't got a very good reason, if you're not saying, right, I want to try it because of this, I genuinely think this might bring something to the matchup that is necessary, and I have a plan for it, and I accept that it might not work, but perhaps it's a learning experience. Maybe I think there's a 1% chance this will be good, and I'm willing to spend this game and this one model in my crew of this game learning whether it's good or not, and if it's bad, I accept. But if it's an important game to you, if it's an MWS game that you care about or whatever, that's not the time to do that kind of experimentation, generally. Depends how many games you manage to get in. If you only play MWS games, like if that's your game for the week and that's it, well, then that's your only chance to experiment as well, so feel free. And I am talking about more people who are aiming towards the top tables, whether they're going to get there or not. But if that's their goal, then I'd be very careful about experimentation during your tournament games. Right. We've gone way off the rails. I did tell you this wasn't planned. There's no notes. There's no nothing. I hope this has been vaguely interesting so far. We're going to move on to the next specific bit that came up from the Malifaux podcast, which is Brandon came to me and he asked me about Ma 2 and said, well, what scares you about Ma 2? That's a great question to ask. That's a fantastic question. What scares you? Fantastic. If you're speaking with your fellow, Thunders player or your fellow guild player or whatever, obviously what scares you isn't the right question, or probably not, because they might be scared of different things because they have a different play style or whatever. But if you're talking about the opposing faction and you want to know what can I bring that scares you and why, that will very often glean very good information. So be thoughtful about the questions you ask people, because if you just say, hey, how do I play Yoko 2? That's such a wide question that it will be really difficult if that person hasn't put a 2-hour YouTube guide out on Yoko 2 and can just go, there you go, watch that. That's how you play Yoko 2. If you don't have that, then that's too wide. So you need to be sort of saying, right, I recently had a guy, quite a new player from Slovakia, come and say to me, hey, so I'm looking to improve with Yoko 2. I've been trying to make distraction work. It's not been working for me. I'd love a breakdown of roughly what I'm trying to do, like turn 1, 2, 3. After that, whatever. But turn 1, I want to know, like, I'm going to use my pass token, sure. And then he was like, how often do I slingshot? How often do I not? If you don't know what slingshot is, that's when Bill smacks one of your own models, moves it up 5 inches, and then generally dives in with heroic intervention. And then the model that you smacked up the board follows that up with a charge, and you can do that because you've done pass tokens, and so that's the slingshot. So he was saying, how often do I slingshot? How often do I not? Really good questions. Like, you're asking very specific, pointed things, and even more pointed was he said, I think I'm playing against Yedza. Does that change the maths on whether I should be slingshotting or not? Amazing questions. Be specific as much as you can when you're asking for advice. And so we come back to Brendan asking about Asami and Ma 2 and what scares me. And I said, well, I've played against a lot of things with Asami and very, very little scares me against Asami because she's brutally strong. But there are a couple of things. One is Ma 2 and the other one is Guild. And then the other one is Asami. So the mirror. That's scary. And he said, okay, fine. He said, I haven't really played Ma 2, but if you think that's the only chance I've got into Asami, then, I'm willing to give it a go. First of all, I think that's very, very brave. I do think that is brave. Like, I personally would just never, even if it was exactly the right answer, I'd never put a master that I'd never played on the table before. And then not only that, he then went on to play the exact crew that I gave him, which wasn't even mine. It had been played against me. So we've gone so many levels of separation away, but he just went with it, trusted the advice of someone who's played the matchup a lot and said, right, okay, I don't know how to beat Asami. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the dice on playing a crew that someone else who knows what they're talking about tells me can beat Asami, and then I'm going to just try and learn it from there. That's a really interesting and cool way to try and approach the game, but it's much braver than I'm willing to be. So you have to decide whether that's an approach for you or not. The reason I've got Trixie Bell up on the screen is because the crew that I gave him was a crew that Plag, again, had played against me and had really made my Asami feel disadvantaged for one of the first times ever. And it was Ma 2 with Rockhopper and a couple of survivors, Trixie Bell, Jebediah, and something else. Was it Bryn or something? Can't remember. And the reason that this works against Asami, if you're unclear, is because Ma 2 makes all of her keyword models immune to hazardous within 12 inches, and she's size 4, so the usual tricks of like blocking line of sight to the master, which you can do against May 2, just never work against Ma 2 because she's so fucking massive. In addition to that, she brings her own hazardous, and interestingly, one of the weaknesses of Asami is hazardous. She is generating it and using it, but she doesn't like having it thrust back at her, and so these pit traps, these injured pit traps with damage on them and scrap markers that can become pit traps are really ludicrously efficient into Asami. And when Asami can't beat you down with Hazardous, she normally switches over to beating you down with Min 3 attacks. But Ma 2 and her keyword bring quite a lot of armor. So you've got this combination of Min 3 doesn't work, Hazardous doesn't work, oh shit. And part of this crew was Trixie Belle, and Brendan came back and just said, I kind of got the crew, you know, my Rock Hopper went off and did his solo thing and nearly sort of held down a flank against Minako, fantastic, good work, and presumably Ma 2 herself was threatening and putting out some serious work, and hopefully had some cups of coffee on her to make the, you know, shut down all the bonuses and maybe make Maddox a lot less efficient and so on and so forth. But he said, I just didn't click with Trixie Belle, and that will happen a lot. If you are a newer player and you copy, you basically net deck, you copy the list of someone who's played it a lot. Usually there'll be a model in there that is there for a very specific purpose. And if you just play the model, you have a look at Trixie Belle here, you have a look at her card and you go, oh, okay, so she's got a lore, she's got free loot, and she's got sharp wit, fantastic. I'm just going to use those abilities. Then you may well completely miss what she's there for. She might be there for something quite specific. In this case, it was sort of it was an anti-Thangyong tech, because Thangyong doesn't love being lured, and basically if anything else gets lured, Than kind of has to take the hit for it. And if you lure a model which is more than 2 inches away from Than, then he has to you're forcing him to decide early in the turn, am I taking the hit, that my 6 inch take the hit, that one time that I can do that, am I doing that now to prevent this model getting lured out and murdered? Or, and also, if Than takes the hit, he does then probably get lured, right? This is a stat 7 lure. And it has this built-in didn't need to see that trigger, which can push the model away. So if you lure Than, you can just push him 6 inches away from, and it's not even push, it's move. So you can move him 6 inches away, which can really fuck with his positioning. So Trixie Belle is largely in the crew to deal with Than one way or another, either by messing around with the model itself or by messing around with the models that he's trying to protect and forcing him one way or the other, and then when he commits, you go and murder the other side. Additionally, free loot is just a ridiculously good ability. It's just ludicrous. And having Don't Mind Me on top of that gives you really a lot of ways to score whenever she's not busy doing the lore stuff. In addition to that, you've got this coordinated attack. Now, Ma hasn't a ludicrously good melee, and so procking coordinated attacks while giving something slow, really, really good. So I do think Trixie Belle does bring some interesting stuff. She's also got this kind of pseudo soulstone theft, but I don't worry about that too much. Mental trauma, it's not a great trigger, especially not when they've got Maddox in the crew. But You're Coming With Me, built in on the melee, allows you to really mess around with the positioning of models, including herself, and then be in a position to maybe use Don't Mind Me. Ill Omens brings that initiative flip, and Brendan was aware of this, and he did try to play the model, obviously. Scamper's ludicrous. If you've ever played against a Scamper crew, you know how good that is. Ill Omens on top, sort of where Ma 1 doesn't bring it, now suddenly Trixie Belle does, so you can generally get the initiative flips that you need, and stuff like that. So if you are borrowing a list from someone else and there's a model that you don't necessarily understand, there might be some general powerhouse models that you kind of get, like, oh, Jebediah, yeah, everything on his card's ludicrously good, fine. Or Big Brain Bryn, yeah, he's in every bio list, like, yeah, cool, I know what he does, fine. Or Guild Steward or Pale Rider, ooh, he goes boom, I'm massively shocked. You don't need to ask anything about that model. Why is he there? Because he's fucking nuts, that's why he's there. But when you see a model like Trixie Belle or a Geisha, or you see someone playing Yoko 1, you should be asking why. And I think that question of what scares you is a really great question to be asking as well. If you haven't listened to it, go and check out the Pack Mentality episode. I think it was really interesting. And even though they were discussing a lot of losses that they had, I think very often that's where a lot of the learning comes from. You might get some ideas about your own learning. And they've also got a Discord channel where a lot of people are sort of setting up their little sort of channels which are based on working on their own learnings and trying to improve at the game. I think it's a really good place to be, and a good crew to get to know. So that's my video. I realised it didn't really have a focused direction or anything like that, and it was more just I was inspired to chat, and I hope you enjoyed the chat at least, and let me know your thoughts down below if you so wish. If not, no worries, and I will see you for the next one, which I'm sure will be soon. I think I'm playing round 3 soon, and I don't think I'm recording anyone else's games, but as always, if you know of a top table kind of game that's going on and you're aware of, do let me know when it's happening, and I'll do my best to come and record it and get it up on the channel. So yeah, have a great one, speak soon, and take care.